So the big news this week is the JSC's suspension of iCreate, suspending trading of their shares until reportedly they publish their audited financial statements. And Julian, I want to start with you. What is going on? Can you explain what this suspension actually means?
Okay, so suspension typically speaks to a pause in the trading of the security based on violation of trading rules on the Jamaica Stock Exchange. So it can be for numerous reasons. It can be because of financials that were published late. It can be for fraudulent actions, and for other examples. But essentially, when a company breaks the rules of the stock exchange, there are certain parameters that are taken as disciplinary action, and one of them is suspension. So that's the situation they're facing right now.
And what can a company do? So typically what happens is it that when a company comes into compliance, then the trading of shares just automatically resumes? And have we seen this before?
Yes, it has happened before with other companies. Um, Naturally, the situation has to be remedied or rectified. So whatever is outstanding needs to be resubmitted, and an application has to be sent to essentially show that, okay, fine, we have now been making changes, and we want to now be given the opportunity to have the suspension removed. So there are many instances that have happened over the years, over the last 20 years or so. For example, that happened with a company called Dial, and there are just many other examples. I can't remember all of them from the top of my head, but suspensions have happened before.
Is it something to be concerned about, especially considering all the trials that iCreate has been going through in the past several months?
Well, suspension has a lot to do with governance, because most most boards of directors have systems in place to ensure that the gaps are filled as it relates to governance. So, for example, the timely filing of various disclosures, whether that be financial statements or corporate actions such as acquisitions and declaration of dividends and so on, or leadership changes. So it has to do with a tiered system, meaning there are different levers, or there are different parameters that are put in place internally to hold companies accountable, meaning leadership within companies accountable. And the board is really there to create that protection barrier. So I wouldn't say it's down to any one person only, but the board of directors also has a role to play in ensuring that these things don't happen, because they're the ones to tap the CEO on the shoulder and say, "Hey, where is this? We're a couple months late with this document,
Mhm.
etc."
So, Leo, if you're an iCreate shareholder right now, what do you do?
All right. Well, the thing is, well, it's because it's suspended, you can't trade the shares. So basically, you're going to have to wait until they get all of this sorted out, and then you have an opportunity to make any execution of shares. Other than that, there's really nothing.
You can't do
Options are
anything.
very limited. Yeah. Now that being said, further to the point I was presented earlier, there have been cases before of this before in the market. Even a company that's fairly actively traded now has been suspended previously because of a similar violation, and they're trading now and everything is fine. That being said, though, of course, it's going to take a big hit to confidence in the stock, at
Mhm.
least in the near term. Again, it's not a insurmountable hurdle, as in like it's possible for them to get over it, but it's going to be hard. And of course, you already know before the company already had issues in terms of the performance of the company. This acquisition was viewed by many because it started speculation based on the stock price movement, and from like below a dollar to almost like four plus, because of all of these announcements about acquisitions and things that they're gonna do. Of course, that now of course is creating issues. So yeah, so basically, if you're a shareholder in this, that's what it's gonna be. And of course, this again, I think it's a point that I made earlier. The thing is, because a relatively small, young company early in the market, it wasn't really for every investor, because again, with any of these things, they can work out, but it's also a risk reward trade off. So It's for each investor to kind of understand what kind of risk they can take, which in my opinion, based on, of course, the business model of this company, what they've been doing, the risk profile would have been relatively high. So it wasn't like a company that had a strong balance sheet, a lot of cash, years of track record of performance that would reduce the risk for investors. So
That's
that's just
true. And yeah, when they listed, they were a startup.
yeah, it was basically a startup, and the business model too was not one that was like locked in stable, one of those consumer discretionary. So it wasn't like for argument's sake, like a diamond trading or selling food products that are more stable,
Like a
known.
supermarket, and everybody
Yeah,
always go to supermarket, right?
supermarket. So there's some level of stability there because of their business model. It was a new. So again, not that new business models can't work, because we see, of course, you look in the US market with your Teslas and your Facebook, new business models can work in it, but it's just that they become more risky. So the thing is, again, is for persons to understand where their tolerance is and to say, all right, I'm young, for argument's sake, I'm willing to take this risk, right? Or to say, all right, I'm an older person that about to go into retirement. Can I take this high degree of risk? So it's about each person kind of understanding, talking to their wealth advisor, and getting a full picture of what this is supposed to be, as in like a part of their portfolio or not. Right? Yeah. So
I love that you raised that point about assessing your risk, because like we said, iCreate was basically a startup when it listed. And the fact is that most businesses fail within the first 5 years. I'm not saying iCreate is failing, but most businesses, most startups, don't make it. And so that's going to mean that it's going to be a higher level of risk if you invest in a company like this. But coming back to Julian, the CEO has now resigned. What do you make of that? And this follows, by the way. So, first of all, in May, the CFO resigned. And then in July, the deputy CEO, who's also the COO, resigned. And then in August, the CEO resigned. And then now we have suspension of trading. What does all of that put together say to you, Julian?
Well, for full transparency, I've been accused of being an iCreate detractor. So the jury is out. Maybe some people will say I'm biased or whatever the case may be, but just following the numbers, the company has been in a situation that has had investors essentially waiting for a turnaround because we've accepted the risk. Fine, the company is a startup. The founder is young and energetic, a visionary, somebody who likes to create new projects. And that's good because in the early stages, companies are highly tied to who their founders are, especially in the beginning. You're really betting on the person more than the company, so to speak, because there isn't much to go by, separate and apart from the capability of the leader and the founder and the visionary. So that's just to put it into perspective. But in successive financial years, we've seen cases where there's inconsistencies around the timing of how financials are released. So some of the filings would have been late, whether it be the audited financials or the annual reports, for instance. And we know the annual reports are very detailed. They would provide the management discussion and analysis to explain what happened over the year. So I remember last year in financial year 2022, I think the annual report was about 11 months late. Now, by the time investors get that information, the business would have changed
11
materially.
months.
Yeah, it was about
How
that.
come they weren't suspended then? That is unacceptable.
Yeah, so it's just a matter of getting information on time and carrying investors along the growth journey, because businesses, they take risk. That's how they make money. But it is the founder's duty to be transparent and to communicate the vision and the story to the investors for them to stay along for the ride, because getting perspective, especially from a company founder, goes a very far way. That's why investor relations is important. Speaking about getting information not only on time but accurate information, and just hearing from the leader and getting information that is credible. So for instance, when we heard about the Visual Vibe acquisition the first time, we would have been told that it was completed in a given time period, and then following that,
January.
right, and then we would have heard that it wasn't in fact complete at that time period. It's now pending and is to be closed in another period. Those are the things that break investor confidence. And it highlights the importance of investor relations as it relates to um, how the stock trades, how easy it is for the company to raise capital later on, how easy it is for that founder to move on to new businesses if they so choose. Because again, each founder and each company leader has a brand, and it is that brand that guides the company's success, especially in the beginning. So these are some of the challenges the company has had, and we really need to take it as a learning moment, as a market, to say, hey, investor relations matter. It's not just about posting financials on time, but showing leadership is really about communicating and creating a connection with the investor base and all stakeholders, because pension funds have also invested in iCreate as well. If we look at the top 10 shareholders, we'll see that pensions are actually at risk as well. So there are many stakeholders, and to see the bigger picture, the founder has to take that into consideration of any business whatsoever. And it just underscores the importance of investor relations on a whole. That's what I take away from it.
And on that very point, of course, we did invite Tyrone to the show, and he said he's not doing interviews at the moment. We also tried to reach out to the interim chairman and interim CEO. They also are not speaking to the press at this time. But I do think that in due course and sooner rather than later, someone needs to address the public on what is going on at iCreate, because, like you said, investor confidence has already been taking a hit. And with the suspension and now the resignation of the CEO, I can't imagine what's going to happen when trading actually does resume, when the JSE allows them to finally resume trading of those shares. Now, on the point, Leo, of Tyrone's resignation, there is precedence for founders to be kicked out of their companies. We saw Steve Jobs was basically kicked out of Apple, Apple being the company that he created. We don't know that Tyrone was forced to resign. I saw Lauren tweeting that actually he's been sick this entire year, and that's why he resigned, so he could focus on his health. So there's that aspect of it as well. But how unusual is it for a founder of a company to exit a company, especially if things are going how they are now?
It's not unusual for a founder to exit. Of course, the circumstances vary. So sometimes, of course, founders can just leave because they feel like they've done well and this is the time for them to step down. I mean, you could look at like a Howard Schultz for Starbucks in the US for that. So you can have that too. In this case, of course, it's a mixed bag. It's kind of somewhat speculation as to why exactly he left. That being said, though, there can be a positive from it, meaning because of the changes that we've seen in the leadership position, of course, they're suspended now. There can be hope that, when they, send in the reports that, they resume trading, that they actually start to execute and perform well in terms of the reporting, the performance, and build back that confidence. So that's basically the best case scenario. The probability as to how that's going to play out, well, I guess that's anybody's guess at this point, because of course we need, actual numbers in order to, match it out and see exactly where this thing can go.
It definitely makes us nervous. It makes you nervous that, well, are they that bad that they can't tell us what the numbers are?
Yeah, it's mixed, because all right, so I've seen companies before that you take forever to get the numbers, the audited numbers, and the numbers are actually that bad. It's just an accounting issue, meaning, them back and forth with the accountants and all sorts of things. And that creates an issue in terms of the length of time. So that could be a scenario. I'm just laying out all the scenarios here because of course, we don't know exactly what's going on there. So that could be a scenario in their defense. That being said, though, it's just that as a listed entity, though, you tend to have priority with the auditors in terms of them making sure that you have everything on time to report, because, of course, you're under more scrutiny than, for example, like a private company, which they might not get that audit done like at the same pace as you get with a listed entity. And then again, of course, it's up to management in order to make sure that they have their stuff together, that the audit can be done smoothly and that everybody can get what they need on time. But it's gonna, as you said, there's no doubt about it. It's gonna shake investor confidence. I'm only stating that there's a potential for them to recover. But that being said, a lot of investors probably not even gonna want to wait for that. But it is the nature of the game. Again, you take an investment, you take the risk, you take a chance with it, and this is kind of how the scenario can play. Again, it's not the end of the road, but it is what it is in terms of the type of risk and the what they call it now, increased negative sentiment that's gonna probably be around the stock for a while at least. They can get all this sorted out.
Looking at potential worst case scenario, Sean says, if the situation isn't rectified, iCreate will go back to becoming a private company and the shareholders will have to find their own buyers for the shares. Is that what would happen, Julian?
To be honest, it depends on the other variables at play, because I believe none of us here have the full story. The management team has not really given us the reason that the CEO has stepped down. So I think that's a key variable in determining what comes next. And we don't know the audited financial statement position, so we don't know how strong the company is in terms of its balance sheet, because the balance sheet essentially tells us how much time a company has left. The balance sheet and the cash flow statement, that is really the determinant of where a company stands. So there's still key information that we don't have as yet. So I wouldn't go as far as talking about next steps until we have that, the audited and a formal disclosure and communication from iCreate to say, look, this is what is happening. And that's why I stressed in investor relations, we shouldn't have to speculate. Why is it that we don't know if it's health or if it's related to the company? We don't want a medical report, but if it's that serious, investors deserve to know, because
Facts.
that's what they invested in.
Absolutely.
They invested in Tyrone, and they deserve to know.
Absolutely. You're completely right. So hopefully we hear something from them very soon.